The lobby of JFK Terminal 5 was buzzing with its usual chaos. The sound of suitcases rolling across the marble floors, gate agents calling boarding groups over crackling intercoms, and the low murmur of thousands of conversations in a dozen languages. The clock in the terminal read 7:15 a.m., and the morning traffic to Europe was in full swing. Maya Chen Washington, wearing her AirPods, stood relaxed but alert in the priority access line. She wore what she called her invisible uniform. This uniform consisted of a coal gray cashmere hoodie from an unknown Japanese brand, perfectly tailored black jogger pants, and a pair of limited edition sneakers that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He wore a pair of limited edition sneakers that cost more than most people's monthly rent, but looked completely ordinary. His hair was pulled back in a sleek low ponytail, and his only accessories were a simple pair of diamond earrings and a vintage Patek Philippe watch given to him by his grandmother. The watch was worth $280,000, but to someone unfamiliar with watches, it looked like something you could buy in a store. Maya carried a single bag, a Tumi brand, minimalist and functional black leather backpack. Inside the bag was her laptop, tablet, 2 phones, and a file folder containing the documents that would, if everything went according to plan, result in a $7.2 billion acquisition that would reshape the future of commercial aviation. To an ordinary observer, Maya looked like any other young professional flying to London for work, or perhaps a consultant, perhaps a tech worker attending a conference. She was certainly not a 29-year-old CEO and majority shareholder of Tech Aero Systems, one of the world's most valuable private aviation technology companies. And she was definitely not someone who owned 42% of the airline she was about to board, Transglobal Airways. Maya specifically preferred this situation. For Maya, anonymity was a luxury more valuable than first-class tickets. Never forget one thing: when people don't know who you are, they show you who they really are. In Maya's experience, this was usually ugly. The gate attendant scanned her boarding pass with a professional smile. "Good morning, Miss Washington. Seat 1A. Everything is ready. Boarding will begin in about 20 minutes. Maya said thank you in a quiet, warm tone. She walked into the gate lounge and found a seat in a quiet corner, away from groups of businessmen networking over expensive airport lattes. She took out her phone and sent a quick message to her CFO, "Takeoff in 40 minutes. The meeting is confirmed for 2 p.m. London time. The numbers look good. Let's close the deal." The CFO replied instantly, "You got this, boss. Take him down." Maya allowed herself a small smile. This deal had been 18 months in the making. Tech Aero was acquiring a European satellite communications company that would give it complete control over real-time flight data transmission across the entire transatlantic corridor. This was a game-changing move. More importantly, it would make Transglobal Airways, in which she had been quietly investing for 3 years, the world's most technologically advanced airline. None of the passengers on this flight knew that, however. To them, Maya was just another ordinary passenger. Boarding began right on time. First-class passengers were called first, and Maya joined the small queue of elite passengers passing through the jet bridge. The moment she stepped onto the plane, she could feel the change in atmosphere: luxurious carpets, soft lighting, expensive cologne, and the scent of fresh flowers. This was the world of the top 1%, and even though she didn't look like it, she belonged here. But when Maya reached the first-class cabin and found her seat, her heart sank. This was seat 1A, the window seat that everyone in the first row coveted. Moreover, the seat was occupied. But the real shock was yet to come. A woman was sitting in seat 1A, her perfectly manicured hand resting on the armrest, a glass of champagne in the cup holder. The woman was in her late 50s, and her platinum blonde hair was styled in natural waves, as if by a team of professionals. Her skin was taut from years of Botox and fillers, and she was wearing a cream-colored Chanel suit that was probably more expensive than a used car. Next to her on the floor sat a huge Hermes Birkin bag, and on her wrist sparkled a diamond tennis bracelet that could have paid for a small village. Her name was Victoria Ashford, but Maya didn't know that yet. All Maya knew was that, judging by the woman's relaxed reclining position, it wasn't going to be easy. Maya stopped in the aisle and checked her boarding pass again. Seat 1A. She glanced at the woman and waited for her to notice, but Victoria was deeply engrossed in conversation with the woman across the aisle. She was also a stylishly dressed passenger and was laughing loudly at something Victoria had said. Maya called out softly, "Excuse me." Victoria paused mid-sentence and slowly turned her head, her eyes glancing at Maya with the kind of disdain usually reserved for something unpleasant stuck to the sole of one's shoe. Maya had seen that look 1,000 times. It was the look of someone deciding you didn't belong here. Victoria said yes. Victoria's voice was impatient and abrupt. Maya politely showed her boarding pass and said, I think you're sitting in my seat. She added, my seat is 1A. Victoria looked at her boarding pass, then turned to Maya, her expression unchanged. Oh, I don't think so, dear. I always sit in 1A, that's my seat. Maya blinked. I'm sorry, but I reserved this seat months ago. Could you check your boarding pass? Victoria sighed dramatically, as if Maya were asking her to do the impossible. She took her boarding pass out of her Birkin bag and looked at it for less than a second. It says 1B, but that's clearly a mistake. I specifically requested 1A. The airline knows I prefer the window seat. Maya said calmly, I'm sure they know, but the window seat is mine. Maya pointed to the aisle seat right next to Victoria's seat and said that's where 1B is assigned. Victoria's face hardened. I'm not sitting in the aisle seat. Do you know how uncomfortable that is on a long flight? People are constantly bumping into you. It's unacceptable. I understand, said Maya, though her patience was beginning to wear thin, but that's the seat you've been assigned. I'd appreciate it if you moved. Victoria leaned back in her seat and crossed her arms. I'm not moving. If it bothers you that much, you can move to 1B. Or better yet, talk to the flight attendant. I'm sure they can find you another seat. The condescension in her voice was palpable. The unspoken message was clear. I'm more important than you. I belong here. You don't. Maya felt a familiar tightening in her chest. Not anger, but weary acceptance. She had been here before. Not on planes, but in boardrooms, investment meetings, conferences. The subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, condescension. The assumptions. The looks that said, how did you get here? But Maya had long ago learned not to argue with people like Victoria. At least for now. A flight attendant appeared, a young woman with a bright smile and a name tag that read, Rachel. She was in her mid-30s, blonde, and moved with the lively efficiency of someone who had spent years dealing with difficult passengers. Everything okay? Rachel asked, her voice pleasant but tinged with impatience. They had a tight schedule, and she clearly wanted to get the plane moving. Yes, everything's fine, Victoria said before Maya could speak. This young woman seems to think my seat is hers, but I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding, she said. Rachel turned to Maya. May I see your boarding pass, ma'am? She asked. Maya handed over the card, and Rachel scanned it, then looked at her tablet. Her smile faded slightly. Rachel confirmed, you've been assigned seat 1A. Then she turned to Victoria and added, ma'am, may I see your boarding pass? Victoria angrily handed over her card. Rachel scanned it and her expression hardened. Your seat is 1B, ma'am, an aisle seat. This is ridiculous, Victoria shouted. I've been flying with this airline for 20 years. I'm a Diamond Elite member. I always get the window seat. I understand, ma'am, but seat assignments are based on availability and time of reservation. This passenger reserved 1A, so seat 1A belongs to them. Victoria's face flushed. I'm not moving. This is ridiculous. My back hurts. I need the window seat so I can lean against the window. Surely you can do that much for a loyal customer. Rachel hesitated. Maya could see the calculation behind her eyes. How easy it would be to seat the quiet young woman in another seat and appease the noisy, demanding passenger. Ma'am, Rachel said, turning to Maya, would you like to sit in seat 3A? It's also by the window, and I can offer you a complimentary glass of champagne for your discomfort. Maya looked at her. No, Rachel blinked, not expecting such a firm refusal. No, Maya said, her voice calm but firm. I reserved 1A. I paid for 1A, and I will sit in 1A, she said. Victoria let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Oh, please, don't be so dramatic. It's just a seat. Take the champagne and sit somewhere else. You're delaying the entire flight. Maya turned directly to Victoria, her dark eyes steady and uncompromising. If it's just a seat, then you won't hesitate to move to your own seat. The two women locked eyes. The cabin fell silent. The other first-class passengers were now watching, some curiously, some uncomfortably. Realizing this was getting out of hand, Rachel forced a smile. I'll call the senior flight attendant. I'm sure we can resolve this quickly. As she disappeared toward the galley, Maya remained standing in the aisle, and Victoria continued to sit smugly in the seat she had taken. The man in seat 2C, a stylishly dressed businessman in his 40s, leaned forward slightly. Whatever happens, he said quietly to Maya, you are absolutely right. She should change seats. Maya nodded gratefully. At least there was someone here with a sense of justice. A minute later, another flight attendant appeared. This attendant was older, with sharp eyes and a serious demeanor. Her name tag read, Linda. She assessed the situation immediately. What's the problem? Linda asked. Rachel quickly explained. Linda listened, then turned to Victoria. Ma'am, you need to move to the seat assigned to you. Victoria's mouth fell open. Excuse me? Do you know who I am? I don't know, ma'am, but that doesn't matter. You're sitting in someone else's seat. Please move. Victoria's face turned an alarming shade of purple. This is ridiculous. As soon as we land, I'm calling the airline. I'm calling the company. Linda cut her off with a steely voice. If you don't move to your assigned seat immediately, I will call the captain and we will remove you from the flight. The threat hung in the air. Victoria seemed to realize for the first time that she couldn't win this fight. Gritting her teeth, she grabbed her Birkin bag, stood up and glared at Maya. This is discrimination, she hissed. You always play the victim. Her words landed like a slap. The cabin fell silent. Maya didn't hesitate. She simply moved aside, allowing Victoria to take 1B, then calmly sat down in her seat at 1A. But as she settled in, fastened her seatbelt, and placed her backpack under the seat in front of her, Maya made a decision. She took out her phone and opened her contacts. She swiped to a name, James Blackwell, CEO of Transglobal Airways. She typed a message, "We need to talk. Call me when you're available." Then she leaned back, closed her eyes and waited. Because Victoria Ashford didn't know who she was dealing with. The tension in the first-class cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. Victoria Ashford had finally moved to seat 1B, but she made it clear that not everyone was happy about it. She threw her Birkin bag on the floor with unnecessary force, adjusted her seat with exaggerated movements, and sighed so often that it could be heard even in economy class. Maya, sitting comfortably in seat 1A by the window, completely ignored her. She had taken out her laptop and was reviewing purchase documents, her face focused and calm. To those watching her, she seemed completely unfazed by the conflict. But inwardly, her mind was preoccupied with calculations that had nothing to do with the spreadsheets on her screen. Flight attendant Rachel, who had initially tried to seat Maya in another seat, avoided eye contact with both women and busied herself with pre-flight checks. Kyle, a young male flight attendant with kind eyes and an unassuming expression, approached them with a tray of pre-takeoff beverages. "Would you like champagne, orange juice, or water?" he asked Maya in a soft voice, almost apologetically. "Water, please," Maya replied, giving him a sincere smile. "Thank you. Of course." He filled her glass with lemon-sliced mineral water and carefully placed it on her tray. Then he turned to Victoria. "Certainly," Victoria said without looking at him. "And make sure it's properly chilled this time." On the last flight, it was almost room temperature. Kyle's jaw tightened, but he maintained his professional demeanor. "Certainly, ma'am." As he walked away, the man in 2C, the one who had spoken earlier, leaned slightly toward Maya. "I'm Daniel," he said quietly. "Daniel Ross. And I just want to say, what happened earlier was completely out of line." Maya glanced at him. He was in his mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, wearing an expensive but simple suit. There was genuine concern in his eyes. "Maya," she replied simply. "And thank you. You're very kind. I've seen this hundreds of times," Daniel continued, keeping his voice low. "People with money and status think the rules don't apply to them. The flight attendant trying to remove you instead of him." He shook his head in disgust. "This isn't the first time," Maya said with a slight shrug. "And it won't be the last. That doesn't make it right." "No," Maya agreed, her eyes hardening slightly. "It doesn't." Victoria, who had been listening to their conversation with growing irritation, finally exploded. "Oh please, stop acting like a hero," she called out loudly to Daniel. "This whole thing is being blown out of proportion. I just wanted a reasonable arrangement and I was treated like a criminal." Daniel turned to her, an expression of disbelief on his face. "You sat in someone else's seat and refused to move. That's not asking for a favor, that's theft." Victoria's face flushed. "How dare you? I'm a Diamond Elite member. I've flown over 2 million miles with this airline. I've earned certain privileges." "Privileges, yes," Daniel replied calmly, "but not other people's seats." Before Victoria could respond, the captain's voice came over the intercom, soft and professional. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Mitchell. Welcome aboard Transglobal Airways Flight 892 to London Heathrow. We are currently third in line for takeoff and expect a flight time of approximately 6 hours and 45 minutes today. The skies are clear over the Atlantic, so it should be a smooth journey. Sit back, relax, and thank you for choosing Transglobal." The familiar announcement seemed to ease the tension a little. Passengers settled into their seats and took out their books, tablets, and noise-canceling headphones. The plane began to move away from the gate, and flight attendants started circulating through the cabin to perform final safety checks. Maya felt her phone vibrate. She looked at the screen. A message had come in from James Blackwell. "Just landed in Chicago. What's going on? Is the deal on track?" Maya quickly typed, "The deal is on track. There's another problem. One of the Diamond Elite passengers refused to give up my seat, made racist comments, and your crew initially tried to appease him by seating me in another seat. We need to talk about training and culture." There was a long silence. Then, "Are you serious? Who was the passenger? Which crew member?" Maya gave the details, including Victoria's name and flight number from the seat list she saw on Rachel's tablet. Another silence followed. Then, "I'm calling the flight manager immediately. This is unacceptable. I'm so sorry, Maya. Don't apologize to me, Maya wrote. Fix the system that makes your staff think this is an acceptable solution. I'll take care of it. Maya put her phone in her pocket and looked out the window as she walked toward the tarmac. The Manhattan skyline was visible in the distance, glistening in the morning sun. She thought of her grandmother, who had cleaned the office buildings in that skyline for 40 years to finance Maya's mother's college education. Her grandmother had never flown first class, never seen Europe, never experienced the comfort and luxury that people like Victoria took for granted. But she had lived to see Maya graduate at the top of her class from MIT. She had seen him found Tech Aero in the garage, and she had lived long enough to see Maya earn her first billion. "This is for you, Grandma," Maya whispered. The plane reached the runway, the engines roared to life, and within seconds they were airborne, climbing steeply into the clear blue sky. Maya closed her eyes and let the familiar sensation of takeoff wash over her. She had flown hundreds of times, but it never grew old, that moment when physics kicked in and the impossible became routine. Once the plane reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign turned off, the cabin crew began service. Rachel, who was clearly still uncomfortable, approached Maya first. "Miss Washington," she said, her voice firm and formal, "would you like to review today's menu?" Maya looked up from her laptop. "Actually, Rachel, I want to talk to you." Rachel's eyes widened slightly. "Of course. Is there a problem with your seat?" "There's no problem with the seat," Maya said calmly, "but I want to understand the decision you made earlier. When you realized my seat was correct, why did your first instinct tell you to move me instead of enforcing the policy?" Rachel's face paled. I was just trying to resolve the situation quickly. Our schedule was very tight, and removing the quiet black woman seemed easier than dealing with the screaming white woman," Maya finished. Rachel's mouth opened and closed. "That's not, who would cause fewer problems?" Maya's voice was still calm, but there was steel beneath it. "Because that's exactly what you did." Kyle, who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward. "Ms. Washington, I'm sorry. Rachel is new to this route, and I should have intervened earlier. What happened was wrong." Maya looked at him and saw genuine remorse in his eyes. "Thank you, Kyle. I appreciate it." Rachel looked like she wanted to sink into the ground. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "You're right. I made a judgment based on assumptions. It won't happen again." "It won't," said Maya. "Because next time, the person in my position might not have the strength to resist, and they'll accept being seen as inferior, because you taught them that's what they are." Rachel nodded, her eyes filling with tears, and ran back to the kitchen. Victoria, listening with barely concealed delight, couldn't resist. "Wow, what a performance," she said sarcastically. "Playing the race card to make people feel guilty. How predictable." Maya slowly turned to her, and something in her expression wiped the smirk off Victoria's face. "Miss Ashford," Maya said, her voice quiet but clear, "you don't realize who you're talking to, do you?" Victoria raised her eyebrows. "Should I? Are you some kind of Instagram influencer? A reality TV star?" Maya smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. "No, but I am the person who owns 42% of this airline. I am the CEO of Tech Aero Systems, which provides the satellite communication and navigation systems that keep this plane in the air. And I am the person who, in about 3 hours, will land in London and sign a $7.2 billion deal that will determine whether TransGlobal can maintain its competitive edge in the European market." Victoria's face paled. Maya continued without raising her voice. "I fly commercial to see how my investments are managed from a passenger's perspective. I dress this way because I don't need external validation. And I chose this seat because I specifically wanted the window seat in the first row, and I reserved it 6 months ago." Victoria's mouth moved silently. "Now," Maya said, turning back to her laptop, "I'm going to get back to work. I suggest you do the same. Or at least stop talking." The cabin fell completely silent. Even the hum of the engine seemed to have died down. Daniel Ross in seat 2C was grinning from ear to ear. "Wow," he murmured. "That was amazing." Victoria sat frozen, her face shifting between various shades of red and white. She seemed to want to say something, to defend herself, to regain some dignity. But probably for the first time in her life, Victoria Ashford didn't know what to say. Maya went back to work as if nothing had happened, her fingers flying over the keyboard. But deep down she had already begun planning her next move, because this wasn't over yet. There was still a long way to go. 30 minutes later, her phone rang again. Another message from James Blackwell. "We're redirecting the London team elsewhere. I want you to meet with upper management at Heathrow." "Maya, thanks for not burning us on social media, yet." Maya replied, "The day isn't over yet, James. Let's see how you handle this." She pressed send and allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The game was just beginning. Meal service began during the first hour of the flight, and the atmosphere in first class changed dramatically. As always, Rumors spread in confined spaces about who Maya Chen Washington was. The whispers started in the galley and spread outward. Passengers pulled out their phones and Googled Maya's name, finding articles about the aviation industry's youngest billionaire, the woman who had revolutionized satellite communications before turning 30. Rachel moved through the cabin with mechanical precision, her previous confidence completely gone. When she reached Maya's seat, her hands trembled slightly as she presented the menu. "Miss Washington," she said, her voice just above a whisper, "for the main course today, we have pan-seared sea bass with lemon butter sauce, short ribs cooked with truffle mushroom mashed potatoes, or wild mushroom risotto. Which would you prefer?" Maya looked up from her laptop, her expression neutral. "Sea bass, please." "And Rachel?" "Yes, ma'am." "Relax. I'm not going to fire you for making a mistake, but I will make sure you learn from it." Rachel's eyes lit up. "Thank you, Ms. Washington. I'm really sorry." "I know," Maya said. "Now get back to work." Rachel nodded gratefully and moved on to the next passenger. When she reached Victoria in 1B, her tone was noticeably colder. "Ma'am, what would you like to eat?" Victoria, who had spent the last hour staring in horror at her phone while reading article after article about Maya, didn't even lift her head. "I'm not hungry," she muttered. "Are you sure? I said I'm not hungry," Victoria snapped, but the venom was gone from her voice. She sounded defeated. Rachel continued on her way without saying anything else. Daniel Ross, sitting in seat 2C, was still grinning. When Rachel took his order, he leaned over and whispered, "I've been in this business for 25 years, and this might be the most impressive thing I've ever seen on a plane." "Sir?" Rachel asked, startled. "Your passenger in 1A, Daniel explained. "That woman has supernatural powers." "Yes, sir," Rachel quietly agreed. "Definitely." After the meal service ended, Maya asked permission to go to the restroom. As she walked down the aisle, she noticed some admiring, some curious, and some uncomfortable stares. She was used to it. Everything changed when people found out who you were. When she returned to her seat, she found a handwritten note waiting for her on her tray. It was written in neat, careful handwriting on Transglobal Airways letterhead. "Ms. Washington, my name is Linda Hayes. I am the senior flight attendant on this flight, and have worked for Transglobal for 18 years. I personally apologize for what happened during boarding. What you experienced is unacceptable and reflects poorly on all of us who wear this uniform. I have reported the incident to our supervisor and ensured the captain is aware. If there is anything I can do to make the rest of your flight more comfortable, please let me know. With sincere apologies, Linda." Maya read the note twice, then carefully folded it and put it in her laptop bag. Linda Hayes, she would remember that name. People who take responsibility are rare and valuable. She took out her phone and wrote a reply email to James Blackwell. "Your senior flight attendant, Linda Hayes, has restored some of my confidence in your company. Promote her." The reply came within minutes. "Already taken care of. She'll be appointed training supervisor next month." "Maya, I need to tell you something. Victoria Ashford isn't just any passenger. She's Marcus Ashford's wife, meaning the CEO of Ashford Hotels. They're one of our biggest corporate clients. This is going to get messy." Maya looked at the message, then typed a reply. "I don't care who her husband is. Rich people can't treat others like trash just because they have money. If you're worried about losing the Ashford account, maybe you should be more worried about losing your integrity." This time there was a longer silence. "Then you're absolutely right. I'll take care of it, trust me." Maya put her phone in her pocket and looked out the window. They were somewhere over the Atlantic right now, the ocean stretching endlessly below, a blue expanse punctuated only by the occasional passing ship and distant landmass. The world looked different from here, smaller, simpler, more manageable, but Maya knew better. The world was complex and chaotic, and telling the truth from the comfort of an airplane wouldn't change power structures. Real change required constant pressure, institutional reform, and a willingness to make uncomfortable decisions. She was ready to do all of that. 2 hours into the flight, Captain Mitchell's voice came over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are currently cruising at 41,000 feet and making excellent time. In fact, we will be landing about 20 minutes ahead of schedule. Flight attendants, you may begin your final service." Maya used this opportunity to stretch her legs. She walked toward the back galley where Linda and Kyle were preparing the final beverage service. Linda straightened up immediately when she saw her approaching. "Miss Washington, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Maya reassured her. "I just wanted to thank you for your note. It meant a lot to me." Linda's face softened. "I meant every word. What happened was wrong, and I'm ashamed it happened on my watch." "You weren't the one who did it," Maya pointed out, "but you were the one who accepted it and took responsibility. That's what matters." Kyle, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "Miss Washington, can I ask you something?" "Of course. How did you manage to stay so calm?" I mean, when someone treats you like that, how didn't you explode? Maya smiled. Because exploding is what they expect. People like Victoria Ashford want you to get angry, to yell, to cause a scene. That way they can point at you and say, see? I was right about them. They're aggressive. They're difficult people. But if you stay calm, if you stand your ground without raising your voice, they have no leverage, and eventually they reveal their true faces to everyone watching. Kyle slowly nodded, trying to process this. If you're a woman of color in environments not designed for you, you learn early on how to fight without fighting. Linda looked at her with open admiration. You're going to change things, aren't you? Not just on this flight, but across the entire industry. I'll try, Maya said, but I can't do it alone. I need people like you, people who care about doing the right thing, even if it's uncomfortable. Will you help me? Linda extended her hand. It would be my honor. They shook hands, sealing a silent agreement at 41,000 feet. When Maya returned to her seat, she found Victoria standing in the aisle, clutching her Birkin bag tightly to her chest. The older woman looked pale, her previous courage completely gone. I need to say something, Victoria began, her voice trembling. Maya looked at her and waited. I called my husband, Victoria continued. I told him what happened, and he told me I was stupid. She let out a bitter laugh. He told me who you are, what you do, how powerful you really are, and he said I needed to apologize before you ruined the whole family's reputation. Maya's expression didn't change. Is that why you're apologizing? Because your husband told you to? Victoria's face crumpled. No. I mean, yes at first, but then I started reading about you, about what you've achieved, how you built your company from scratch, and I realized. Her voice trailed off, tears streaming down her face, ruining the rest of her perfect makeup. What did you realize? Maya asked. That I'm the kind of person I always swore I wasn't, Victoria whispered. I've lived my whole life surrounded by wealth and privilege, and I thought that made me special, important. But the truth is, I'm just a bad person who treats people badly because I can get away with it. Maya was silent for a long time. Then she stood up and looked Victoria in the eyes. You're right, Maya said simply. You're a bad person, and you're entitled, and you're racist, whether you want to admit it or not. Victoria flinched as if she'd been slapped. But, Maya continued, her voice softening slightly, you're also standing here crying, admitting it. That might mean you can be better. That's what I want from you, Victoria. I don't need you to apologize to me. I want you to think about every interaction you have with service workers, with people who aren't like you, with people you think are beneath you. And each time, I want you to choose to be better than you are today. Victoria nodded, now clearly crying. I will, I promise. I'm so sorry. Don't promise me, Maya said firmly. Promise yourself, and then prove it. Victoria stood there for a moment longer, then turned and ran back to her seat, her shoulders shaking. Daniel Ross, who had listened to the entire conversation, gave Maya an admiring look. You could have destroyed her, he said quietly. One phone call, one social media post, and you could have finished her off. Why didn't you? Maya sat back down in her chair. Because destroying people doesn't change systems. It just creates more fear, more resentment. I want Transglobal to be better. Not because they fear me, but because they genuinely believe in doing the right thing. You're either incredibly naive or incredibly smart, said Daniel. Maya smiled, maybe both. As the plane descended toward London, Maya pulled out her phone one last time. She wrote a message to James Blackwell. We'll be landing in 20 minutes. I expect a full briefing on your action plan within 48 hours. And James, this isn't over. We'll sort this out properly, together. The reply came instantly. I wasn't expecting anything else. Thank you for giving us a chance to fix this. Maya gazed out the window at the mosaic landscape of the English countryside, green fields and old villages. Somewhere below, a meeting room filled with investors awaited her. A multi-billion-dollar deal was about to be signed. But first, she had changed something far more valuable than a contract. She had changed minds. The plane landed smoothly at Heathrow, and when the seatbelt sign went off, Maya gathered her things. She was the first to stand up, and as she walked toward the exit, all the flight attendants watched her intently. Linda stepped forward. Miss Washington, it was an honor to have you on board. The honor was mine, Linda, Maya replied. Then, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear, she added, this crew handled a difficult situation with professionalism and integrity. Thank you all. As she disembarked, she heard applause behind her. The applause started with Daniel Ross and spread through the cabin. First class, business class, even economy class passengers who heard it whispered up front applauded. Maya didn't look back. Head held high, backpack slung over her shoulder, she descended the jet bridge, ready to tackle the next challenge. Because that's what she did. She overcame challenges. Heathrow Airport's Terminal 5 was its usual controlled chaos, a flood of people flowing through glass and steel, heading to thousands of different destinations. But Maya Chen Washington moved like a knife through water, carving a clean path that opened naturally around her. She had that quality, the ability to command space without demanding it. As she passed through customs, a streamlined process thanks to her global entry status, her phone began to vibrate with a series of notifications. Messages from her CFO, legal team, and investors. Everyone wanted to know if she was on schedule, if the deal was still on, if everything was proceeding as planned. She sent a group message, landed, on schedule, meeting in 90 minutes, all good. However, a message from an unknown number caught his attention. Ms. Washington, this is David Thornton, Vice President of Customer Experience at Transglobal Airways. Mr. Blackwell asked me to meet you in the arrivals hall. I have a sign with your name on it. A car is waiting, and we would appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes before your meeting. Maya stopped at the terminal, passengers flowing around her like water around a rock. She could ignore this, get in her own car, and go straight to her meeting. The deal was the priority. Nothing should get in the way of that. But she also knew this was an important moment, a turning point. Transglobal's response within the hour would determine whether what happened on that flight was a one-time fix or the beginning of real systemic change. She replied, "I'm giving you 30 minutes, not a second more." When she stepped into the arrivals hall, she spotted him immediately. David Thornton was a tall, thin man in his early 50s. His hair was graying, and he had the slightly flustered look of someone who had been woken in the middle of the night to resolve a crisis. He held a modest sign with Maya's name on it, and when he saw her approaching, he visibly stiffened. "Miss Washington," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you very much for agreeing to this meeting. I know your time is very valuable." Maya shook his hand firmly. "You have 30 minutes, Mr. Thornton. Make good use of it." "Of course." He pointed to the sleek black Mercedes waiting at the curb, the driver waiting with the door open. "We've arranged a conference room at the Sofitel, just 10 minutes from here. Your meeting location is another 15 minutes from there, so you won't lose any time." Maya nodded and got into the car. Thornton sat next to her, and the driver smoothly merged onto the traffic. "I'll get straight to the point," Thornton said as he entered the highway. "What happened on Flight 892 is completely unacceptable and represents a fundamental failure on many levels. Mr. Blackwell has asked me to urgently and thoroughly review our customer service protocols, staff training, and corporate culture." "That's a good start," Maya said, her tone neutral. "But I've heard those words before. I'm more interested in concrete steps." Thornton took out his tablet and opened a document. "We've already started. This morning, London time, we took the following measures. First, mandatory unconscious bias training will be provided to all customer-facing personnel, including flight attendants and gate agents. This training will be completed within 60 days. Maya raised her eyebrows. "Unconscious bias training is trendy, but a one-off seminar is usually ineffective. What's the structure?" "It's a 3-part program," Thornton replied without hesitation. "First, an intensive workshop, followed by refresher training every 3 months. And finally, integration into all ongoing training modules. We're also implementing a real-time feedback system where passengers can report their concerns directly through the app, and these reports will be sent not just to customer service, but directly to senior management." "Better," Maya approved. "Anything else?" "Second, we're revising our conflict resolution protocols. From now on, if there's a disagreement over seat assignments, the rule is simple. The person with the correct seat assignment stays. Period. No exceptions based on status, no bargaining, no trying to placate the louder party. We enforce the rules we set." "That should have been policy already," Maya pointed out. "You're right," Thornton conceded. "And failure to consistently enforce that rule is leadership failure. Which brings me to my third point, accountability. Rachel Holbrook, the flight attendant who first tried to remove you, will be assigned to a role with no customer contact until she completes additional training. She won't be fired, but she won't work with passengers until she fully understands why her actions were wrong." Maya thought about this. "What about the passenger?" "Victoria Ashford." Thornton's expression hardened. "Ms. Ashford has been permanently banned from Transglobal Airways and all our partner airlines. Her Diamond Elite status has been revoked, and after imposing a significant fine for her disruptive behavior, we refunded her ticket. Additionally, this was Mr. Blackwell's personal decision. We have terminated our corporate partnership with Ashford Hotels." Maya's eyes widened slightly. This was a significant decision. The Ashford Hotel's account was worth millions of dollars annually. "This will cost you dearly," she said. "Yes," Thornton agreed, but Mr. Blackwell was very clear. "We cannot claim to value diversity and inclusion while maintaining partnerships with individuals who actively oppose these values. It sends the wrong message." "It sends the right message," Maya corrected, "but only if you follow through. Words are easy. Consistent action is hard." The car arrived at the Sofitel, and they were quickly ushered into a private conference room. Thornton opened his laptop and pulled up a presentation. "There's more," he said. "We want to create an advisory board focused specifically on equality and inclusivity in the travel experience, and we want you to chair that board." Maya leaned back in her chair and studied him. "You want me to work for you? We want you to help us get better," Thornton explained. As a major shareholder, technology partner, and someone who has experienced the failures in our system firsthand, you have a unique perspective. We need that voice at the table, not just as an advisor, but as a leader within our organization. Maya was silent for a long time, her mind working to process the meaning of this. This was more than she had expected. This wasn't just damage control, it was a real structural change. What kind of authority will this board have, she asked. Direct reporting to the CEO and board of directors, Thornton replied. Budget authority to implement recommendations. And veto power over any policy changes that affect customer experience and employee behavior. Veto power, Maya repeated. That's real authority. We are serious about this, Ms. Washington. What happened to you was a warning. We can choose to ignore it and hope it goes away, or we can use it as a catalyst for real change. Mr. Blackwell wants to choose the latter. But we can't do it without you. Maya stood up and walked to the window, looking out at London's gray sky. Her meeting was in an hour. She had a $7.2 billion deal to sign. She had a company to run, technologies to develop, a future to build. But she also had a grandmother who cleaned toilets so her children could fly on planes like the one they had just boarded. She turned to Thornton. I accept on 3 conditions. First, the advisory board must include voices from the ground, flight attendants, gate agents, baggage handlers, not just managers. Second, all findings and recommendations must be disclosed to the public in the annual report. Transparency is non-negotiable. Third, I want Linda Hayes, the senior flight attendant on my flight, on my team. She understands what needs to change and has earned the respect of those who have to implement it. Thornton didn't hesitate. Okay, and okay. Maya extended her hand. Then you've got the seat. They shook hands, and for the first time since the meeting began, Thornton smiled. Thank you, Miss Washington. You're giving us the chance to be the airline we should have been from the start. Don't thank me yet, Maya said. I'll hold you accountable. All of you. And if I find out this is just for show, I'll make everything public. Understood? Very clear, Thornton assured her. And to be honest, I trust you. We need someone who won't let us get complacent. As the car took her to the meeting, Maya's phone rang again. This time the message was from James Blackwell. David said you accepted. Thank you. I know we don't deserve your trust, but I promise we will earn it. Maya replied, You're right. You don't deserve it. Earn it. She put her phone in her pocket and took out the folder containing the presentation materials. The acquisition meeting. The $7.2 billion deal. That was the only reason she was on this plane. But as the car approached the sleek glass tower housing the investment consortium's offices, Maya sensed that something had changed. Yes, she was about to sign the biggest deal of her career. Yes, she was about to expand her empire and cement her position as one of the most powerful names in aviation. But today, what she was most proud of wasn't the deal. It was standing tall in seat 1A. It was refusing to change her seat. It was using her power not just to win, but to change the game for everyone who would fly after her. His grandmother would have been proud of him. Maya got out of the car, adjusted her hood, slung her backpack over her shoulder, and entered the building. She had a deal to close. And then what? She had an airline to fix. The lobby of Grostal Capital Partners was entirely marble and minimalism, the kind of carefully designed elegance where old money tries to look modern. The receptionist, with a sharp British accent, directed Maya to the 17th floor. There she encountered an intern who looked about 12 years old and very scared. Ms. Washington is expecting you, said the young man, almost trembling. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? Thanks. I'm fine, said Maya, amused by his nervousness. She had learned that in financial circles, where someone under 30 who had become a billionaire through their own efforts was still a rarity, her reputation usually preceded her. The conference room was exactly as she had expected. A long mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking London, and 8 men in expensive suits, all of whom stood up when Maya entered. Ms. Washington, said the man at the head of the table, extending his hand. Robert Hensworth, managing partner. We're very pleased to have you join us. Thank you for accommodating my schedule, Maya said, shaking hands with each of them in turn. She noticed their subtle reactions, their momentary surprise at her youth, her casual clothes, her appearance. She was used to it. She sat down in the chair at the far end of the table, took out her laptop, and connected it to the screen system. Within seconds, her presentation appeared on the giant screen behind her. Gentlemen, she began, her voice clear and confident, let's talk about the future of transatlantic communications. For the next 90 minutes, Maya was in her element. She told them about the technology, the market analysis, the competitive advantages, and the projected returns. She moved seamlessly between technical details and financial projections, answering their questions with ease. But in the back of her mind, she kept thinking about seat 1A, about Victoria, about Rachel, Linda, and Kyle, about the systemic failures that had led to this situation. And she realized this deal, important as it was only one piece of a larger puzzle. Real power wasn't just about accumulating wealth or making deals. It was about using that wealth and those deals to change the structures that made people like her grandmother invisible and people like Victoria privileged. When she finished her presentation, she could see from their faces that the deal was done. "Miss Washington," said Robert Hensworth, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied smile, "I think that was the most impressive presentation we've seen all year. I speak for all of us. It's a deal." Maya gave a small smile. "Excellent. My legal team will have the contracts to you by the end of the day." As the meeting ended with handshakes and congratulations, one of the young partners approached her. "Miss Washington, if I may ask, there's a rumor going around about an incident on your flight this morning in the aviation industry. Is it something about Transglobal Airways forming a new advisory board?" Maya looked at him, her expression neutral. "News travels fast." "It does in our world," he acknowledged. "Is it true? Will you be taking on an official role with the airline?" "Yes," Maya confirmed. "Someone has to make an effort to ensure that flying is an equal and dignified experience for everyone, not just people like you." The young partner blinked, not expecting such a direct statement. Then, to his credit, he nodded. "Good. The industry needs that." As Maya left the building, her phone was flooded with messages. As expected, news of the deal had leaked. The financial press was already running headlines. Tech Aero completes record $7.2 billion acquisition, and Maya Washington solidifies power in aviation sector. However, a different set of headlines had begun circulating on travel and aviation blogs. Transglobal Airways announces comprehensive capital restructuring, and major airline forms advisory board on discrimination following viral incident. Maya got into her waiting car and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She had succeeded at both the deal and the change. Her phone vibrated with a call. "James Blackwell." "Maya," he said when she answered. "I just heard the news. Congratulations on the acquisition." "Thank you," Maya replied. "And congratulations on something else too," James continued. "Today you started something bigger than any flight or any passenger. All the major airlines in the industry are watching what we're doing. You're changing the whole culture." "We are changing it," Maya corrected. "It works if everyone commits to it." "They will commit," James assured her. "I'll make sure of it." After hanging up, Maya leaned back in her car seat and closed her eyes. She was tired, not from flights or meetings, but from the emotional exhaustion of fighting wars that shouldn't have been fought in 2024. But she was also energized, because for every Victoria Ashford who needed to be reined in, there was a Linda Hayes ready to step up. For every Rachel who made a mistake, there was a Kyle striving to do better. Change was slow and frustrating, and often felt impossible. But it was happening, one step per flight. 3 months later, Maya found herself at JFK Terminal 5, in the same priority access line where this whole story began. But now everything was different. There were new signs in the terminal, bold, clear graphics highlighting Transglobal's equality on every journey commitment. In the staff areas, training posters displayed diverse faces and clear protocols. And most importantly, there was a new presence at the gates: equality ambassadors, staff members specially trained to intervene in cases of discrimination or harassment. Maya was dressed as she had been on that fateful morning, comfortable, simple, ordinary. But this time she wasn't traveling alone. Walking beside her was Linda Hayes, the senior flight attendant who had written her that note. Linda was now the cabin crew training director and an important member of Maya's advisory board. "Are you nervous?" Maya asked as they passed through security. Linda laughed. "I'm scared. I've flown thousands of times, but this is different. Especially knowing we're looking for problems, gaps in the system. That's why it's valuable," Maya reassured her. "The mystery passenger programs work because the crew doesn't know who's watching. We'll see how the changes are actually implemented, not how management thinks they are." They were flying first class to San Francisco on a route where several complaints of discriminatory treatment had been reported during the first audit. This was Maya and Linda's 4th flight together, and each one revealed both progress and ongoing problems. As they approached the gate, Maya noticed a commotion near the priority boarding line. A young black man, estimated to be in his early 20s, was being questioned by a white gate agent in her 40s who appeared skeptical and impatient. "Sir, this boarding pass says you're in first class, but I need to verify that with my supervisor." "This looks unusual." Maya and Linda looked at each other. This was exactly the kind of situation they were looking for. The young man, wearing a university hoodie and jeans, looked embarrassed and nervous. "I already explained I'm flying miles. I saved up for 2 years to get this upgrade. The card is valid. Can you just scan it?" "I have to verify it first," insisted the attendant, picking up his phone. "We've had problems with fake upgrades." Maya stepped forward, her voice calm but clearly audible. "Excuse me, what aspect of the boarding pass are you questioning?" The gate attendant looked up in surprise. "I'm sorry, ma'am, this is none of your business." He stopped mid-sentence, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Oh, Ms. Washington, I didn't realize, you didn't notice I was here. Maya finished his sentence. That's the point. So I'll ask again. Specifically, what is the problem with this passenger's boarding pass? The attendant's face flushed. There's no specific problem. I just wanted to verify. Verify what? Linda interjected in a professional but firm voice. Is the barcode not scanning? Does the name not match the ID? Or are you surprised he's flying first class? The young man, not knowing who these women were but clearly grateful for their intervention, looked back and forth between them. The card is valid, the attendant acknowledged quietly. I apologize, sir. You can board the plane. The young man nodded, grabbed his backpack and hurried toward the jet bridge, giving Maya and Linda a grateful look. After he left, Maya turned to the attendant. What's your name? Jennifer Morrison, the woman replied, her voice slightly trembling. Jennifer, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to be honest. If that passenger had been a hooded white boy, would you have questioned his boarding pass? Jennifer opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at her shoes. No, she whispered finally. Probably not. Probably not, Maya repeated. That's the problem. You make split-second decisions based on unconscious biases. And those decisions hurt people. It makes passengers feel unwelcome in places they've paid to be. It reinforces racist biases, and it damages this airline's image. I'm sorry, said Jennifer, her eyes welling up. I didn't even realize I was doing that. I know you weren't aware, said Linda, her tone softening. That's why we have training. Jennifer, have you completed the new bias awareness modules? I missed the last class. I was going to make it up this week. Make it up today, Maya said firmly. And Jennifer, next time you feel the need to verify someone's ticket, ask yourself if you'll do it for everyone, or just for people who don't seem to belong here. That's your test. Jennifer nodded, wiping her eyes. Yes, ma'am, I will, I promise. As Maya and Linda boarded the plane, Linda shook her head. It's been 3 months, and we're still dealing with this kind of issue. We'll be dealing with it for years, Maya said. Culture takes time to change, but at least now there are consequences and accountability. That's progress. They settled into their seats, Maya in 1A, Linda in 1B. Both noticed the irony. A flight attendant appeared. A young Asian woman with a bright, sincere smile. Good morning. Welcome aboard. May I offer you anything before takeoff? Just water. Thank you, said Maya. Of course. And Ms. Washington, I want to say how honored I am to be on the same flight as you. The changes you helped implement have made this job so much better. We have protocols now. We have support. That means everything. Maya smiled warmly. What's your name? Emily Chen. Thank you, Emily. And thank you for the work you do every day. You make the difference, not me. As Emily walked away, Linda leaned in. You're really good at this. Good at what? Redirecting praise, empowering others. It's a talent. Maya shrugged. I learned very early on that real change doesn't happen because someone at the top gives an order. It happens by empowering people at every level to do the right thing. Emily and her team are the ones who make it happen. I just opened the door. The flight went smoothly, and without incident, just as they wanted. Smooth and incident-free meant the systems were working. It meant passengers were treated with respect. It meant the crew felt empowered to apply the policies fairly. Halfway through the flight, Maya's phone vibrated with a notification. She looked at the screen and smiled. What is it? Asked Linda. An article was published in Aviation Weekly, said Maya, turning her screen to show Linda. The headline read, Transglobal Airways sees 43% decrease in discrimination complaints in first quarter following Washington initiative. Linda's eyes widened. 43%. That's a huge number. It's a start, Maya said. But our work isn't done. We still have a 57% rate. When she landed in San Francisco, Maya had 3 hours before her return flight. She used that time to meet with members of the advisory board's West Coast chapter. This group consisted of flight attendants, gate agents, and customer service representatives who had volunteered for the Equality Initiative. They gathered in the conference room of the airport Marriott, and the atmosphere was electric. These were people who had been unable to make their voices heard for years, who had witnessed discrimination but lacked the authority or support to address it. Now they were being asked not just to report problems but to help design solutions. We need to talk about the language in the customer service manual, said Marcus, a black gate agent in his 30s. Right now the manual says we have to accommodate difficult passengers. That word gives people like that woman on your flight, Victoria Ashford, an opportunity. They think accommodate means give them what they want. We need to change it to professionally implement policy. Maya took notes and said, I agree. Then she added, what else? A flight attendant named Rosa, who was of Latin descent, raised her hand. The uniform policy. They say there's no gender discrimination anymore, but the options for women are still much more limited than for men. God forbid you're black or Latins. You can't even wear your hair naturally. Professional appearance standards are coded discrimination. Linda shook her head vigorously. I've been fighting this battle for years. Work is ongoing, but we need to push harder, she said. They talked for 2 hours. They shared their stories, identified problems, and proposed solutions. Maya listened, took notes, asked questions, and made sure everyone was heard. By the end of the meeting, they had compiled a 17-point list of policy changes to propose to the board. As people were leaving, Rosa approached Maya. "Ms. Washington, may I ask you something personal?" they said. Maya replied, "Of course. Why do you care so much? I mean, you're billionaires. You could travel by private jet and never have to deal with this. Why put yourself through this?" Maya thought of her grandmother. She thought of Seat 1A. She thought of everyone who felt small because others had decided they didn't belong. Maya then simply said, "Because I can." She added, "I have the resources, the platform, and the power. If I don't use them to do something better, what's the point of having them?" Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. You're changing people's lives. You realize that, right?" Maya corrected, "We're changing them together." That evening, on the flight back to New York, Maya finally began to think about everything that had happened since that morning 3 months ago. Confronting Victoria, the phone call to James, the plane landing, the media frenzy when the story leaked. It had been both exhausting and exhilarating. She had been labeled everything from a hero to a troublemaker to a fame seeker. Conservative media had accused her of playing the race card. Progressive media had hailed her as a champion of justice. And through it all, she had just kept working. The $7.2 billion acquisition had been successfully completed. Tech Arrow's stock value had increased by 34%. She had made Forbes' list of most powerful women and Time's list of 100 most influential people. But none of this mattered as much as the email she had received last week from the young man she had helped at the door that morning. She had found his contact information on LinkedIn. "Ms. Washington," he wrote, "you probably don't remember me, but you stood up for me when a gate agent at JFK questioned my first-class ticket. I was going to my grandfather's funeral and had saved up for 2 years to upgrade my ticket because I wanted to honor him by flying in a luxury he never experienced. When the agent questioned me, I felt so small, like I was back in a place I didn't belong. But then you and that other woman stepped in. You didn't just defend me, you taught that agent a lesson. You made a difference. I wanted you to know that matters. Thank you." Maya read this email 3 times, tears streaming down her face, because that's why she was doing this. Not for headlines or praise, but for that young man, her grandfather, and everyone who had ever felt worthless. As the plane descended toward JFK, Maya gazed out the window at the sparkling lights of New York City, spread out like a constellation. Below, in one of those nameless buildings, was the office where her grandmother had cleaned toilets for 40 years. Below, there were millions of people like her grandmother, working in invisible jobs trying to build a better life for their children. And below, in boardrooms, cockpits, and cabin crews, there were people slowly, reluctantly beginning to understand that the world was changing, that people like Maya no longer asked for permission. They were taking their places in first class, in boardrooms, in positions of power, and they weren't budging. When Maya finally stepped off the plane at JFK, tired but satisfied, she saw a familiar face at the gate. It was Victoria Ashford. Maya stopped, genuinely surprised. Victoria looked different, somehow older, more worn. She wasn't wearing expensive clothes. Instead, she had on a simple dress. Her hair was styled naturally, no longer perfectly perfect. "Miss Washington," Victoria said, her voice trembling, "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I needed to talk to you." Maya studied her for a long moment. "You have 5 minutes." They walked to a quiet corner of the terminal. Victoria took a deep breath. "I spent the last 3 months in therapy," she began. "Real therapy. Not the kind where you just talk about your problems and complain. I face things about myself that I've avoided my whole life. Racism, entitlement, how I treat people I look down on." Maya listened, expressionless. "I can't take back what I did to you," Victoria continued. "I can't take back what I said, or how I behaved. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better. I volunteer at a community center in Harlem, teaching English to immigrants. I work for a nonprofit that helps formerly incarcerated women find jobs, and I'm educating myself about systemic racism and privilege. Really educating myself." "Why are you telling me this?" Maya asked. "Because you showed me mercy when I didn't deserve it," Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. "You could have destroyed me completely, but instead you told me to be better. And I'm trying. I'm really trying." Maya was silent for a long time. Then she said, "I'm glad you're doing this, Victoria. But you need to understand something. You're not doing this for me. You're not doing this to earn my forgiveness or approval. You need to do this because it's the right thing to do, because you hurt people, and you need to make an effort not to hurt anyone like that again." "I know," Victoria whispered. "I know. Good." Maya paused for a moment, then added, "Keep doing this. Not for 3 months or 3 years, but for the rest of your life. This is what you need to do to make amends. Victoria nodded, wiping her eyes. Thank you, for everything. As Maya walked away, Linda's earlier words echoed in her mind. You're changing people's lives. Maybe she was. Or maybe she was refusing to accept the world as it was, insisting instead on a world as it should be. Either way, she wouldn't stop. She had planes to fly, companies to run, systems to change. And she had a seat with 1A written on it. 6 months after the incident, Maya took the stage at the International Air Transport Association conference in Montreal and addressed an audience of 3,000 airline executives, pilots, and industry leaders. We talk a lot about the passenger experience in this industry, she said, her voice echoing clearly in the large conference hall. We talk about comfort, efficiency, and luxury. But we don't talk enough about dignity. The audience listened to her in silence. Honor isn't about champagne service or reclining seats, Maya continued. It's about treating every person who boards your aircraft as if they belong there, because they do belong there. Whether they're in first class or the back of economy, whether they're wearing a suit or a hoodie, whether they're white, black, or brown, they belong there. She paused to let her words sink in. 6 months ago, I boarded a plane and was told I didn't belong in the seat I paid for, not because of something I did, but because of how I looked, and I had the resources and power to fight back, but millions of passengers don't. They accept discrimination, microaggressions, and everyday cruelty because they have no other choice. This has to change, not because it's good PR or good business, though it is both, but because it's right, because every person who trusts us to get them safely from point A to point B deserves to make that journey with their dignity intact. The applause was thunderous, a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. After the speech, as Maya stepped off the stage, a young black woman in her early 20s, wearing a 3-stripe pilot's uniform, approached her. Miss Washington, said the young pilot, her voice trembling with emotion, I just want to say thank you. I'm a first officer at a regional airline, and I've been fighting to become a captain for 3 years. Every time I apply, even though I have more flight hours than most of the white male pilots who get promoted, I'm told I'm not ready. But after what you did, after the changes you pushed for, my airline finally started reviewing its promotion practices, and last week, I found out I'm getting my 4th stripe. Maya smiled, her eyes warm. Congratulations, Captain, you earned those stripes. Yes, the young woman acknowledged, but you opened the door. As Maya walked through the conference center, past the booths, the exhibits, and the hundreds of people who now knew exactly who she was, she thought about how much had changed in such a short time. Transglobal wasn't perfect. No airline was perfect, but they were better. Measurably, numerically better. Discrimination complaints were down 67%. Staff retention was up. Passenger satisfaction scores were at their highest level in a decade. Other airlines were following suit, implementing similar programs, creating their own advisory boards, training their staff differently. The industry was changing, because a woman had refused to give up her seat. That evening, Maya sat alone in her Montreal hotel room, watching the city lights. Her phone vibrated with a message from her mother. I watched your speech online. Your grandmother would have been so proud. I am so proud. You are changing the world, baby. Maya smiled, tears streaming down her face. She typed a reply. I'm just trying to make sure everyone flies in the seat they paid for. My grandmother taught me that everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are. I'm just carrying on her work. She put down her phone, took out her laptop, and opened her calendar. Tomorrow she had 3 meetings with airline executives, 2 interviews with aviation magazines, and a conference call with the advisory board. The work never ended. Because progress wasn't a destination, it was a journey. And Maya Chen Washington was just getting started. That morning at JFK, she thought about the moment she stood in the aisle next to seat 1A and refused to budge, confronting Victoria Ashford. At that moment, she had no idea that her momentary resistance would spark a movement. But perhaps change always happened this way. Not with grand gestures or sweeping declarations, but with small acts of resistance. With ordinary people saying no when told to accept less than they deserved. By refusing to budge, Maya closed her laptop, took out her grandmother's watch, and stroked the worn dial with her finger. The glass was scratched, the leather strap faded, but it still worked perfectly. Maya whispered again, "This is for you, Grandma. Every seat I sit in, every door I open, every system I change, it's all for you," she added. And Maya liked to think that somewhere in the universe, her grandmother was smiling, because her granddaughter had learned the most important lesson. Power wasn't just about what you built or owned. Power was about using what you had to ensure others had the same chance to rise. and Maya Chen Washington used every ounce of her power to ensure that the next person boarding the plane, whoever they were, however they looked, was treated with the respect and dignity they deserved, starting from seat 1A all the way to the back of the plane, because everyone deserved to fly.